You can't secure something you can't define.
Every vendor would say like, oh, security's priority. It's security first before we get this product out. But really, in reality, it's get the product out first. Security is usually an afterthought.
So if I'm the bad guy, I'm looking at billions of devices that are largely unattended.
And these devices are normally riddled with vulnerabilities because some of them are pretty old and run dated firmware. And they're also riddled with engineering bad practices.
Hi, and welcome back to our podcast. This is Dan Berthet, your host. I'm Director of IoT Security here at Bitdefender, and I've got a couple of really good colleagues of mine joining me today to discuss what else, our favorite topic, IoT. So I have Steve and I have Bob. I'll let them introduce themselves, a couple of brief words, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Steve Fiore. I run, actually head of public relations for Bitdefender. I work with both Dan and Bob a lot on IoT as well as other cybersecurity research that we put out.
I'm Bob, Director of Threat Research and Reporting. I work with Dan in uncovering new stories regarding IoT, among others.
Yeah, so that's right. We do end up working together a lot, which is one of my favorite things because I feel in good hands with you guys. But kind of trying to relay exactly what's going on is we have a quite an extensive history in IoT, namely over the last 10 years with some of the products and projects that we've spearheaded. In fact, we've been doing quite a lot of innovation in this space. In a space that wasn't really properly articulated. In fact, we actually have research that where we're trying to define what IoT meant just because we found hundreds of definitions out there on what it meant. So to that point, you can't secure something you can't define.
We've kind of been doing IoT before it was a thing,
Correct.
right? We had to go to establishing the framework first and then start working on the real problem. I remember the 2012s. Dan, do you remember how things looked like more a decade ago?
100%, and it's a great one that, you know, I connected home at the time meant I have a PC or a laptop, a connected printer somehow, and you know maybe a mobile phone, and that was about it. And all of a sudden, right, you flip a page, go 2 years forward, and there's like all these new devices that show up in the home. And from a consumer standpoint, I remember it was exciting. It was a new world of possibilities. But at the same time, from a cybersecurity standpoint, we were looking at a whole new front, a whole new avenue of an attack surface that we as an industry were never prepared for. And why is that, right? What was different from the before? What do these devices bring new that we didn't envision?
From a lab's perspective, I would say that the sheer number of devices has become problematic. Not only that, but the fact that we have been throwing devices after devices at a market that wasn't saturated at that point proved to be one of the fundamental mistakes that we have done with the internet. Between 2012, when we first got in touch with these connected devices that we label as IoT devices now, up until 2016, when the first signs of problems started to show up, it's been just 4 years, right? In 2012, we didn't quite have IoT. In 2016, we had too much IoT, and hence Mirai and the rest of the problems. And what started to be a strictly user-centric issue, like maybe the IoT device is spying on me in my home, or it's leaking my data to somebody else, has become a fundamental issue to the internet itself, right?
Because what turned out to be billions of new devices just laying around is in essence, all of these things, and especially over the last few years where, hardware has improved and gotten cheaper by a large degree, right? All these connected devices are essentially computers always connected to the internet, always on. So if I'm the bad guy, I'm looking at billions of devices that are largely unattended, that have largely, no rhyme or reason. There's just not one unified platform because, if we're looking at, the other war fronts we're looking at, the Windows, PC, Macs, and so on, the classic platforms, if have you, there's a lot of there's regulation, there's there's solutions, it's all well known and done.
The security market is a little bit more mature, right?
100%.
You have antivirus, you have firewalls, you have stuff that prevents you from shooting yourself in the foot.
What do you do when you have thousands and thousands upon thousands of manufacturers that have basically no oversight, no rules, various platforms, various chipsets, various cloud systems and apps, and who's doing any research on at a scale of kind of harmonize them and make them secure? Nobody, in effect, and it's only the last few years that we've seen improvements in a more centralized manner, and we can touch base on that. I'm talking about the newer cybersecurity trust mark, the verified mark of the Matter Group at CSA and so on. Now, finally, with these initiatives, we're seeing some sort of semblance of harmonization and oversight and guidance of what a good IoT system should look like, right? And what does an IoT, when we're looking at the system, what's impacted, right? Because you have a hardware component, you have a cloud component, you have an app component. So
there's a huge attack surface.
Exactly.
And these devices are normally riddled with vulnerabilities because some of them are pretty old and run dated firmware. And they're also riddled with engineering bad practices. Remember that up until 2018, I guess, most of the devices would come with a default username and a password. And they were just laying out there for anybody to be able to connect to them from the outside world and then, wreak havoc, build huge armies of zombie devices that they will then use to attack different targets, high-profile targets on the internet, right?
Exactly. So since you're not the direct victim, you're probably going to be less incentivized to take any sort of action. So how did you see this from your standpoint of a media czar who are looking down on the industry, and how it changed? How did you perceive it, and where are we at this point?
So a couple of things. So IoT research, and we've been doing it for years. A lot of it is the consumer products, so like the baby monitors, and that always makes media excited because it's the cyber criminal creeping into, taking over a baby monitor and creeping into somebody's home. It makes a good story. It's kind of a scary story. And that tied with big brand names. So you got the issue of the cyber creeper, and then the big brand name creates it's a great story. So we've seen that for years. What's interesting is touch back to the number of devices in the home, right? So we run a report with Netgear, our partner, right, on just the number of, looking at the whole IoT landscape. And what I found interesting is, and you say this a lot when you speak with reporters, is go in your house and count how many IoT devices you have, or at least think about how many do you have. And it's like, well, I have like 4. I got my computer, I got my mobile phone, and there's like 4, right? Well, that number is actually 20 plus. So then you start thinking about, oh yeah, my watch, oh yeah, my kids' watch, oh their phone. So the attack surface,
tablet and the Kindle and this and that. And
so from a media perspective, that story actually that was like the second tier where they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's like, I didn't know the attack surface was so big, and it keeps growing. Now where we are now is, and we did research, and I'm sure you'll talk about this, it's really cool research with Solarman and Dye, where we found IoT vulnerabilities, but in a solar infrastructure that connected to
a different kind of network.
Yeah. So it ended up being it's not just a cyber creeper in your home now, it's actually a national security issue, which that story is now coming over to the media. They're like, well, wait, what's this research? I thought the electric grid you couldn't attack it. It's like, well, now you can, because these devices are now connecting through the internet to the electrical grid, and it's creating a national security issue. And that's why I think we're seeing all these, programs. It's turning more mature and more real, that this is a real.
Funny thing how in less than a decade, things have escalated from a consumer issue to an internet issue and then to a national security issue. How do you feel about that, Dan?
I mean, I remember because we were in this for so long, you know, when we developed the solution that was going to protect the home, the Bitdefender box, and that was the first of its kind. And it you know, we knew it was a big deal, but we didn't know where this was going to go. And largely, normally, whenever we talked to somebody, was at the media or peers and so on, it was all a consumer play, and it was like, not a big deal, nothing. We always saw this as a more meaningful thing just because of the sheer number of the potential impact, you know. These devices being exploited for different, you know, reasons, taking down networks fully, taking ISPs down through the, you know, DDoS attacks to the individual device and so on and so forth. So we try to mitigate these, but then, like you said, we end up last year in a situation where it's just completely transitioned from the innocuous, oh, it's just a baby monitor, just doing not, you know, nefarious, but not huge things. And it's all like, oh my God, the whole grid can collapse now because a fifth of the whole, you know, global grid is, you know, potentially vulnerable to this attack, to this particular manufacturer that we discover vulnerabilities in. And yes, your average, you know, nuclear plant, coal plant, gas plant, so on, so on, they're air gapped, they're super solid, are usually not connected directly to the internet and stuff. But right now you have these individual solar farms on people's homes, solar panels on the people's homes, and then you move on. The same systems, they're not going to make a whole new platform for a solar farm that's, you know, a few acres, and that's an industrial, you know, production capability. Now you have all of these and always on, because that's how it works. You know, I mean, you can talk about how, you know, yeah, let's just, so how does a current day solar system work? What's the components? How does that, you know?
That's a very cool question, actually. The grid stays in balance. At every time people are turning on switches, production capability has to kick in to pick up that load. It's called a load because it puts strain on the electric grid, right? And one of the fundamental pieces of the grid are coal plants, nuclear, right? Hydro production, which can cover for the baseline load. But on top of that, we have solar and wind farms that help us take down the costs. And they're brilliant because it helps us expand the energy output beyond the conventional. Thing is that these devices are mostly sitting in users' homes, and they're connected to the internet at one end, and they're connected to the grid at the other one. So basically, what we've done in the past few years was subsidized the installation of a new type of endpoint.
Yep.
Because it's an endpoint in the end, right? It accidentally makes power, but yeah, it's an endpoint connected to your network and to your grid. So when cyber criminals can get access to these endpoints en masse, like they would do with traditional IoT devices, they're not use them to DDoS specific targets, but they will use to destabilize this load that we were mentioning before. And it's very easy to do so. Probably you're not going to be able to just fry people's devices by increasing voltage or current produced by the solar installations, but you will be able to force the loading of batteries, which will produce a massive unbalance in the grid. Right. And that goes all the way back to potential blackouts. Dan, I think you should be leading the conversation here because you have presented that at DEF CON last year. Right? You're
right. Yeah, we delivered a presentation for DEF CON talking about the research that we did on this subject matter, particularly in these kind of products. And I mean, maybe personally, I want to be, you know, sometimes you kind of go about your day and you wish at some point you could come back and tell people, I told you so. But in this particular case, I wasn't happy because we spent the last 10 years telling people how this is evolving into something that's massively concerning. And now we're at the point where we have actual proof how serious this threat is and how people just not been imagining.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer, like, with what we're talking about, the research that we did is like, it's going to take, unfortunately, like most things, it's going to take a big event to happen. Yeah,
I honestly, I hope that doesn't happen. And I hope like the research and the presentations and the efforts that we're doing to communicate these things are going to hopefully bring some more visibility
But
before that happens?
realistically, I remember the moment you got off the stage and we were approached by a couple of fellow researchers who were investigating different brands. And they were like, you know what, this is not an isolated case. There are plenty more vendors of this type of equipment that are vulnerable to similar types of attacks. And it's not just vulnerabilities that are similar to what we discovered. It's also massive misconfiguration, because there's a huge ecosystem of partners that make solar energy available in people's homes. You have the vendor on one side, you have the contractor that installs and configures the device, and you have the end user, which also is the beneficiary of the energy produced. And even if the vendor gets it right, the contractor will probably leave a default password for the device. So it will still be a security issue that's going to be very difficult to identify. Nobody is probing these devices. Nobody wants to look into how an inverter is configured unless you're a security researcher.
Yeah. Steve, how did you perceive the change from the baby monitor stories to what happened did you see a transformation? Are we getting there?
Yeah, 100%. So transformation. So, most of the IoT research that we did is, of course, the security reporters that are interested, talking about the baby monitors, the other stuff, the consumer IoT that we did. What I'm seeing now, which is really interesting, is like we're not fielding calls just from them anymore. We're fielding calls from energy reporters. We're fielding calls from infrastructure like reporters, healthcare. So it's way beyond security now. And so in a way, to me, that's a positive step forward, because I think the message is getting out industry wide, like, hey, this is like a real problem, and it could be something big at some point, which I hope it never does. But
I mean, because the reality is, and I keep saying this a lot, and I will repeat myself forever. It's not a question of, is there devices more vulnerable than others? Every device is at risk. There's no guarantees. There's always going to be a vulnerability. One point in time, there's always going to be something in a particular device that's potentially prone to be exploited, or maybe will be exploited at some point in time. And the game here isn't to make sure that everything is super, because it's impossible. And we're not putting, blame, we're not pointing fingers. It's not what we do. And in fact, that's exactly why, we looked at the most popular consumer devices for years, doing this, which is in effect is academic research, to understand how these devices work, what makes them, vulnerable. Put out those reports when we found those vulnerabilities to improve on the general knowledge of the industry. So we're improving on, the manufacturer's product and processes, hopefully, making the world a better place, making it safer for those devices to reside in people's homes, drawing awareness and so on. So it's kind of we're really giving back to the community, and hopefully making, this, and of course the other initiatives that we have with, the input that we have with our partners, where we actually put intelligence into the tools that can, filter or prevent attacks, and, different layers from, Netgear to
You're
ISPs.
touching on a very sensitive topic here. I'd like to get back to this discussion with a question. How do you feel that the IoT is so widely spread that it's impossible to actually understand what you cannot see there? Who's responsible for the security of a phenomenon in the end, which includes so many vendors, so many ecosystems, so many types of devices with such great lifespans? Sometimes these devices outlive the vendors that they make.
And working with you, Dan, all the time, we see in a happy world, every vendor would say like, oh, security's priority. It's security first before we get this product out. But really, in reality, it's get the product out first. Security is usually an afterthought. Some vendors do it better than others. Some really try to quickly fix things when they see it and they appreciate it. Some, we won't name names, of course, but some, it's taken years. It's either You can't get a hold of them. Maybe the product's going to end life. They don't care. They don't want to put resources into fixing stuff. So we've kind of seen the whole gamut.
I think the industry, this particular industry, is especially guided by price and purchase price. So people would go on, Amazon, what have you, or go to Best Buy and pick up whatever baby monitor or camera for their backyard that's cheaper and has a couple of good reviews. And they're not going to necessarily go for the name brand if budget is their concern. And it's completely understandable. You need, if you have a good house, you're going to need 10 of these things, and you're going to get, and you don't know, there's no way for you to assess the security and what goes inside these things. And, to be fair, and we have data to prove this. It's also, unfortunately, one of the sides of the industry where there is the utmost, the least regard towards providing, security for longer and providing security to the life cycles of the expected product. Any other industry treats their devices with a planned obsolescence more respectfully than the IoT industry. How many devices, because I can name a few, and we can, I miss devices that were sunset way before I would have expected them. These things are not going to last. You're not going to, you're going to buy a laptop now. You might upgrade. It's going to be the same. You could probably use a laptop for 10 years now, but usually these devices are not going to be around for more than 3 years. And unfortunately, they don't get supported for longer than 1.5 or 2 years either. So,
but they're still going to be part of your infrastructure, maybe 7 or 8 years after
absolutely.
that. Back to the energy sector. Now imagine that we have we all have smart lighting in our homes. We have circuit breakers that are connected to the internet, and that will be unsupported. But to the manufacturer's defense, sometimes they tend to outsource stuff.
Yes.
And we've seen that.
110 million devices, 110 million devices at the mercy of one platform. These respectable manufacturers, which most are, having trusted to provide them a means to operate these devices, just because the platform they were using happened to have vulnerabilities. They were all impacted, and they had almost no say in it. They had to get that resolved, and they were at the mercy of getting that thing sorted out. And each of their, each manufacturer that uses a particular platform has, we all have, a roadmap. We have a plan, we have features that we need to add, maybe some customization. So somebody could fix things right away because they had a good timeline in the roadmap. Some other manufacturers had to wait for months. Maybe they didn't get the support they wanted. Maybe the contract wasn't as generous. So maybe, the platform wasn't going to offer them support. It's insane. It's insane. It's such a crazy place to be in. And the impact is so incredibly, sneakily large that I think the fact that we never stop talking about it, it's the reality of what it is. And finally, we're seeing some semblance of government oversight that's so much needed from, the EU bringing in regulation of this, Singapore leading the way with their, legislation, to safeguard these things. And of course, most of these programs, by the way, be it the cyber trust mark in the US, be it, the verified program, they have limitations. And, I'm not going to call them toothless because they're not, but, their understanding of the starting point they're in. They're just kind of setting up the bar for, the lowest hanging fruits. They're not very, they could, in my opinion, but hey, I live in a white tower of cybersecurity. So to me, with all these things we could be doing, but it's a start.
I'm still going to hold you accountable for an answer. I asked you who is responsible for the security of the IoT devices and the inherent security of the rest of the infrastructures that are connected to. At a moment where we see breakthroughs in cybersecurity, but these breakthroughs are like in the range of recommendations rather than regulation and legislation. So, we've got great progress. You mentioned the US Cybersecurity Trust Mark. It's still a sticker that marketing people can use if they want it, but that's not a barrier from importing stuff and selling it into your local markets. So who should be responsible for what happens?
So customers don't want to deal with this. They don't have the understanding, the acumen, the care, or frankly, and they shouldn't. And anybody that puts the onus on the user shouldn't, right? And again, by the way, we used to talk about the user like you and I, like I'm like just a regular guy. I have a home and I got a couple of these devices, but no longer. This spans into the enterprise. You know, I mean, hey, we're in an office space right now, and these TVs are not enterprise level TVs. They're something that people actually use in their homes, and they might share resources of the corporate, you know, the corporate network. And just to give you one example of how these things permeate, so it's no longer one of these things. So yes, users should never have any responsibility ever because they don't have any sort of metric of what's good or not on how to fix things, and it should not be put the onus on. Governments, although some people decry outreach, I strongly suggest having some semblance of regulation and some way to endorse and encourage good practices and responsibility, because I mean, frankly, if there's no repercussions to, screwing the pooch and making the end, like the whole grid falling, I mean, I'd think that somebody's getting a very generous pass. So up until now, I feel like the only players that actually rose up to the challenge were the ISPs. And then router manufacturers in part. So for example, our partners at Netgear and some ISP partners that we work with who understood that they are at that place where the internet meets the home, and they are that choke point that could control and prevent potential attacks. And it's not their job, it's not their expertise, but they're taking it on them to solve some of these problems, which is, amazing if you ask me, because it's already reduced the footprint by a long stretch. So.
And he who controls the communication medium should be also in charge of security.
I don't disagree. Although I think it should, and it is just like any other space that we practice in, it's a multi-layered approach, right? So it's the regulation of the government, it's potentially, the provider of the connectivity, it's players like, ourselves and others that can make different products available to safeguard. There's different things in place you can do, right? You can we've done this for so many years with our pioneering product. We put the device in the home because that was the only way that we could do this. So I think it's all up to the point that we need to communicate this clearly. So and I think you're seeing the same thing, that there is understanding and action on this, and you're seeing that directly with the work that you do.
Yeah, definitely. I going back, it is coming more to the forefront, but there's just that line between consumer. So the consumer and the enterprise are crossing over. I still think on the consumer side, you just mentioned it, it's really not on them. I guess strong passwords and stuff like that would be on them, right? But like updating and making sure that updates are pushed to the IoT devices, that's on the manufacturer. In my opinion, a lot of it's around the manufacturer. We've said again for like years that sometimes they just don't care. Sometimes we reach out. Sometimes we can't even reach them, So I think there's steps that they can do. Literally just put a phone number somewhere on their website where you can like reach out and say, hey, we're a security group and we found a vulnerability. You need to fix it in a timely manner. So
it's crazy because then you mentioned that. So in our research over the last 10 years, we've roughly been in the situation where you'd think finding vulnerabilities is potentially the hardest thing to do, right? You'd think that's the hardest thing to do. Or you'd think fixing them is, oh my God, so tough. And they're challenging. I mean, don't get me wrong, like you need the best in class people to be able to identify those vulnerabilities, because if it was, trivial, everybody would find them, but it's not the hardest thing. The hardest thing in our experience was reaching affected vendors, to your point, where we're seeing maybe, so in our policy, in a general policy, every other researcher group has the same kind of general policies. You find a vulnerability, you notify them, give them a 90-day runway to address the and patch and fix, and then you can communicate these things. And 90 days, like the 3 months, is from the time you communicate, the time you reach out to them until the whole thing is resolved. But we've seen that it was over 70% of over 70% of the cases, vendors did not reply, not even within that limit, and over 25% of the vendors replied after a year or more, never replied at all, which is egregious, because you cannot solve, like what we're talking about is millions, hundreds of millions of devices in the market that are just left unattended because we cannot reach the vendor, because they don't have a simple website that's, you know, vendor/security where there's like an email, a contact for us to call and be like, guys, there is this issue with your device that we have found and you need to address it quickly. And it's a simple thing that just they have not found the accountability for.
We've actually even had arguments with media from time to time when they find out, like, it took how long to get this fixed? And they kind of point the lens towards us, saying, like, you didn't say anything. It's like, well, the other alternative is to release a 0-day. So you want that?
Can you imagine? Yeah, can you imagine putting, like, so what does that entail, right? We find a vulnerability and we're waiting on the vendor to address it, to patch it, to fix it, so those devices stop being vulnerable. Now, for us to make a statement before they do and be like, hey, we found the vulnerability, this is what it does, means explaining potential attackers that may not be aware of it, what they need to do to exploit it. So what we're saying is, well, let's just say that because it's the right thing to do. So, you know, some script kiddies on the internet attack 100 million devices and weaponize that. That's unacceptable, of course. So we're in a really tough spot here because
sometimes it's a last resort.
Yes.
Like you'll always have to presume that somebody already knows about these exploitation techniques and they are covertly doing that
100%
behind everybody's back. And sometimes you'll have to say something if you see something, and that's releasing.
I mean, of course. I mean, we're not talking about situations where we never got a reply and we're just sitting there. Like most of the times, in all fairness, most of the times when they do reply, they'll ask for more time. Maybe it really takes time. Like you said, they're working with partners and they depend on fixing the platform that's not even under their control. So they'll negotiate a runway, which runways sometimes or most of the times going to extend past the 90 days. But in a category of products that has an average life cycle of 3 years, anything goes past a year. Let's say, look, the product's been on the market for 18 months. We find a vulnerability on month 20. They're already well past the midpoint of the life cycle of that product. You don't know when that came in, if it's been exploited and so on. So if the manufacturer takes another year, like, it's just, you know, that perspective is insane. So speed is of the essence. We find a vulnerability, we let them know, they fix it, they patch it quickly. So, and all this, by the way, can be mandated by, you know, a governmental program. I mean, like, okay, so if you're going to put this product on the market, this product on the market is going to be on the market for this long, you have to provide, you know, security patches with this quality of service at this amount of time and this quickly, and you should be able to patch them this quickly as well. And you should provide security patches and support to this product, you know, even 2 years after it's sunset and so on and so forth. I mean, you know, you cease to develop it, but you have to still provide patches and stuff. Or, I don't even know, develop a kill switch. All of these things are just going to stop operating, so you don't leave stuff on the. But no, I mean, it's a nuclear option, but you can't leave these things off on the internet just sitting there.
Especially when they leak out into the national security.
100%, exactly.
So I think that's another issue too, both on the consumer and the enterprise side, is how once a vulnerability is found, how it works. So I think a lot of people, I still hear it a lot, is just like, hey, I'm not an important person. Why would a cyber criminal target me? Or, hey, I'm a small company. Who cares about me? I'm just this little distributor. It's like, yeah, that's not how it works. So it's, you know, once a vulnerability goes out there, the cyber criminals, they're not targeting one-on-one. They're massively scanning. They know this vulnerability. All of a sudden it lights up. There's something over here. Oh, there's something over there. Let's see if it's interesting. Let's see if they're connected to anybody. Let's see what their supply chain looks like. And from there, that's how the attacks. So it's very automated. I think it's getting more dangerous as there's AI and there's more automation out there, and it's just things are getting quicker.
I guess that the first wake-up sign about what's going on in the IoT space was the Internet of Things census of 2014, when a couple of researchers have crawled the internet looking for devices that had open connectivity or that had known vulnerabilities to be exploited for hijacking them. And but at this point, it's a little bit more dire because it's not researchers who are interested in these findings, but there's cyber criminals that are organized in hijacking these devices, and even governments. And we've had a couple of cool interactions with law enforcement, because it's not just cybersecurity companies that are concerned about what's going on there. Being an issue of national security, there's a lot of entities that are watching this space to see if they can disrupt.
So for those, for those who wouldn't know, for example, there's Showdown. So you can go on Showdown, which is basically a Google. It enables you to find devices that are, IoT devices are available, accessible through the internet, which is not their intended, by design feature. Or I mean, of course they're able to be, but like controlled, and then you can find all these things. So the fact that it's just being democratized that way is scary. And what sets the IoT apart from other matters of general cybersecurity from ransomware and other things as a threat landscape, I believe, is the fact that IoT is so much easier to solve, as in all of these are running issues, but with proper development cycles and and planning, with good regulation. And by the way, there's products like we talked in technologies that are able to block attacks even of vulnerable devices without necessarily being in the know of that vulnerability, because of the ways the AI and ML works to be able to detect those attacks. So what I'm saying is, there's so much better odds to secure IoT devices and make it a safer space than other types of woes. That for us that we've been so close for so long, it's just surprising that we're just not getting there so more quickly, right? We've published a bunch of papers last year, and I know Bob's been has been covering them as well. And did you remember anything else? So we had the solar infrastructure issue, we had the cameras issue. Let's dispel some of the myths. For example, Steve was talking about it. So for example, people expect that whenever somebody connects to a camera in their home, they're going to get spied on, but that's not what's happening.
Not necessarily, and that's why I mentioned national security standards twice and law enforcement in the same phrase. Last year was a key moment for us, because we had just wrapped up an investigation that we started in 2018. It was the interplanetary storm botnet that was used by state actors. We have also seen a couple of botnets focused on routers, for instance, that were used for spreading disinformation. They were transacted as anonymous VPN endpoints for various state-sponsored activities.
Give me an example how those things were used in practice.
A couple of very lucrative cyber criminals who are not interested in the commercial aspects of running an IoT botnet had been compromising IoT devices for years. They have curated lists of IP addresses that they needed, and they had rented out to another cyber criminal group, which is apparently linked to a state organization. And these VPN, let's call them, exit nodes. Yep. On the internet, or VPN endpoints, had been used to spread out fake news, disinformation, to host various types of illegal content, and some of these actions were linked to what happened in Ukraine and in Russia at this point.
So the difference between this, for example, and a regular VPN infrastructure, is that with a regular legitimate VPN provider, most of the times is like a known cluster of servers that can be identified. They're
and it can be blocked.
And it can be blocked, and it's in one unit. But this is basically the whole internet. There could be any.
It's very dynamic. It's effectively fanned out across the world, and it looks organic for everybody. Last quarter, in December, Cloudflare published their State of the Internet report, and they said that the IoT was responsible for massive DDoS attacks last year. We had broken a record for the 12th year in a row.
Which reminds me of the statistics around the Mirai attack. I think it was 2019, the latest I got the information, where I think the estimate was about 70% of the whole IoT internet traffic was malicious in that year, which is completely nuts if you just think about it. And it's largely unknown. It's just something that people have no idea about. This is devices in people's homes that are quietly doing other things that people have no say in or control of, and it's.
you're helping criminals in your home and you don't know it.
You don't know it, right?
You become an accessory, and that's an issue because you are actually actively contributing to the disruption of the internet.
I mean, you're always going to take, you want, you obviously want the camera for your backyard and front yard, the porch and stuff. You want these devices. You want the convenience. You want the technology's there. It's the whole promise of it, right? So you want it. So you're not going to be, you're not thinking you're bringing down the internet by doing this. And you shouldn't, really. It's not your fault. It's, that's the tool that you've been given. But what's the reality? And in fact, I just want to remind you, and nobody's going to break into that camera to see somebody's backyard. I mean, they could, but it's just not how criminals work. It's a waste of time. It doesn't generate money. I mean, unless you're a very important person, we're not going to be doing that. And like, politicians, activists, journalists, whatever, maybe those people be. But usually what happens is I'm going to use that device to get access into the rest of the network. Maybe the account you've used to set up that, a baby monitor camera or smart lock or whatever, uses the same password you use for your Gmail account or your banking or whatever. And then, there's so many ways you can exploit this and beyond, right? So
or the corporation that you're connected to because you work from home. We all work, or at least mostly.
Which brings me to another important aspect on my list. You then said that companies should be responsible for the fallout they leave behind after they terminate the product or after they go bankrupt. And yes, of course, if you're buying well-respected brands, you will probably be better taken care of in terms of security updates.
Generally, what we've seen in practice.
Fixes than if you're buying a knockoff or a no-name brand out of China. But there are companies based in specific locations that are selling devices riddled with malware, and that's TV streaming boxes that are advertised as pirate set-top boxes. You just plug them in, and you
get all these many channels and all this stuff.
My brother has one.
Getting everything.
Does it work?
He says it's great, and
Okay.
it's like it's $30, and I get every station ever, and I'm just like, that sounds.
It
Sounds
is great,
a
but
bit.
I'm like, is that legal?
it's a business built on crime that's also actively exfiltrating information about your devices and your home network.
It's an incredible privileged access that these devices have. Extremely important avenues to getting, breaching into other infrastructure and other networks. So, of course, we'll always try to raise awareness, and it's our work. We're trying to communicate, but it just shows, that when we spend the time to look into these devices and look what's up, it informs us, when we publish these reports and understand the risks, and informs us of recommendations we can make as well for the industry at large. And now it's all up to the industry to make their play. But, again, I thought it was an incredible show of foresight from, our partners at Netgear when they saw, hey, this is something that people probably expect of us, and we're able to provide this technology. And they just embedded this whole stack of technologies that secures those routers and the extended networks. And it's a premiere in the whole industry. So we've seen history in the making. And so we did the same with our, ISP partners, but still that hasn't really cleared up the problem. So I'm very excited to see what the new programs bring, and how, hopefully moving forward.
Who's going to be first fined?
Yeah. So I mean, to your point, I feel like, even understanding how the cybersecurity trust mark is going to work is important, right? Kind of opening up a little bit. The program entails that, it's not going to be the government that's going to do the analysis of these devices certification, but rather the government is going to be able to award certain companies to become labs that certify devices. And what that means, they'll have a checklist of things that the device needs to check, and then they'll be checked. I believe there'll be the possibility that the vendor itself can self-certify in some cases, so they'll be able to, and they'll get something akin to your, how your fridge or your TV has that, energy rating. It's like A, B, and so on. So it's going to be similar. This device is, it's an A rated for the security, and you're going to have this label available on, the shelf on the box and everything. So next time you go to Best Buy and you want to pick up a camera for the backyard, you're either going to go for the one that has the better rating or has the labeling and has passed the testing, versus one that doesn't have the labeling
or
at
that's
all.
$10 off. Nah,
If you're gonna go for the one that's $10 off, it doesn't have the label. That's exactly when the woes happen. But I believe the whole industry is kind of moving in that direction. And you, as a manufacturer, are gonna be very compelled. You don't want to be left out. You don't want to be the guy that doesn't have the label.
Some online stores and large retailers have pledged that they will position merchandise more effectively if they have
The rating.
Versus the ones that don't have. So probably the rating will be more prominent. It will help vendors gain a little bit more visibility. What I took issue with, and that's honest, is that this certification only covers wireless devices. Like, why would you do that?
So again, I feel like, and I've been looking at this for a long time, and we have collectively, but I understand that whenever you bring regulation to a space like this, and it's the first of its kind, you're going to start very timid. It's going to be small steps, because you're really starting with a really bad baseline. Like, so any improvement at all is going to make a significant impact. So I would expect that the program evolves and brings, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So we've had situations when the U.S. government in particular has banned certain manufacturers from operating on the U.S. market on different accusations of those devices being weaponized for state purposes. And frankly, that's every time that a government organization, an agency has to take such drastic actions and very targeted actions, they're not solving the problem at large. And a program like the Cyber Trust Mark could solve these things by just creating a foundational or a set of rules that can disbar such manufacturers, as previously stated, on equal grounds and footing, on a very simple process. Right? You either match this level of
compliance,
and then you're going to be on the market. If not, you're kicked out. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So, Steve, you go to your local Best Buy and you're going to get this camera, and this manufacturer, a researcher finds a vulnerability, and this manufacturer takes their time patching the thing, and they go beyond the expected life cycle of the problem, patch it. Right? The government can go through the program and be like, okay, so you didn't do this, you'll get a fine. Second time they do it, they get a bigger fine, and the third time they'll do it, they'll get disbarred from being sold on the market, if so needed. And it's a simple thing. It's a fair thing. You just disregard,
It's like house rules. It's like for your kid. It's kind of like, hey, you can just shrug your shoulders and be like, hey, those are the rules. You didn't follow them. No.
But
now
it's
you
fair.
get punished.
But exactly. But it's fair, because the impact is clear, then the effect is clear. So
well, it stops too from targeting certain organizations, maybe for political reasons or maybe for other reasons, right?
And to your point, every time you single out an organization, it just doesn't look good, and it can't. Well, let's put it this way: it can be misrepresented, maybe to some degree of truthfulness or not, but it can be, and that's exactly what you don't want to do. It's legitimate reasons most of the time, so give it and call it what it is. But then if you have a framework that's encompassing, then you're
that
not
everyone understands.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not going to be a situation where, yes, you can argue, but Dan, there's going to be, a domestic manufacturer, because, we're usually talking about, state sponsors in other countries. You'll be like, oh yeah, but the domestic manufacturer could fall through the cracks. That is true. It's a risk we're willing to take, I believe. But yeah, I think the world would be definitely in a better place. So I salute 100% the existence of these new programs, even though they're probably more timid at the beginning. But it's only taken 10 years.
Well, if you put it in perspective, yes. But at least we've got something now. We've got the knowledge. We've had a baseline of how the internet itself gets affected by these devices, and we have hope. It's been really exciting for us to work with a couple of partners that we had. When we discovered vulnerabilities, we reported, and we were very happy to see that they have fixed it and they have taken security seriously. And probably I would advise at this point for people to buy with their cybersecurity in mind, rather than buy the cheapest option available, because that's probably will go.
But in all fairness, even you and I know this, right? Because we've worked with this so long. We could be going to the Best Buy shelf, and I don't think we're able, without having any intel, to make an informed decision based off price, branding, and whatever description we might find on the shelf, really, even with some knowledge, unless you really know what's up.
Funny thing, I went to Cluj a couple of months ago with Dan. Cluj is a very dear city to us because it hosts the IoT research hub that we have. And
it's a university city in Transylvania, Romania.
The team's shelves, they have this huge room with shelves that host devices that we have hacked.
Right.
I was looking at the devices that we have there, and most of them are being bought off large supermarket
chains, right?
chains.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're available in supermarkets does not imply that they're anyhow vetted and secure, and that it's safe for them to be part of your network.
I was going to say it would be kind of cool, like down the road, to see, you see the publications like PC Mag, CNET, they have the reviews of the IoT devices or whatever, TVs, cameras. It would be cool, like, at the end to see, like, oh yeah, they're they got the mark, it almost like a, Consumer Reports does that, with their, some of their household stuff that they're reviewing. But it would be cool to kind of add that in, and so I kind of see like everything coming together, like the Cybertrucks, but that falls into the reviews and the other stuff that's going on.
Because historically, and having been, just Bitdefender has been around for 25 plus years right now. So, and the whole cybersecurity industry is well entrenched. The press has covered things dearly. But I want to salute again the fact that you've been one of our biggest collaborators and supporters in the research and IoT that we're doing. And you're also the ears on the ground for us in the market as well. Where I'm going with this is, prior to the IoT space, the media and journalists were aware of cybersecurity threats, but the IoT was something on the fringe. And now you're bringing all this knowledge to us about how the knowledge is increasing, the questions are coming in, and there's more visibility on the issue.
Definitely more urgency. More, this could be really serious. We need to start paying attention to it. And that is upheld by what we're seeing in Washington and some of the other programs too. So it is all coming together. Like you said, it'll probably start slow, and like you said, there's hope. So I'm glad it started. I'm glad there's hope, and I'm pretty confident that it's going to be headed in the right direction and make the world a safer place.
I mean, our researchers are going to continue to do the research on the newest and I'm just going to frame it out here. Any of you who are interested, how we perform this research. Sometimes it's just sheer curiosity. We're just looking at like that device looks interesting, but it's kind of an editorial process of a popular kind of device that's likely to be in the hands of many, and all the way to some oddball. It's practically impossible to test, do a thorough assessment, a vulnerability assessment of all devices on the market, but a good representation, a sample is good. So as we're doing and continue to do this research and provide intelligence to our tools and products and platforms that we offer for, securing the IoT space, which now has moved into a global impact in both the enterprise and consumer space, we'll continue to put out the news, contribute to the initiatives and the foundation of how the future IoT devices are going to pan out. And I just want to say one more thing. I hope, I hope that we preserve the diversity and the exuberance of the many devices that we get by the thousands of manufacturers that make new devices, because a consolidation under a few roofs of manufacturers will make things more secure and better, but then might just limit the creativity. And so I hope we find a balance, and even the smaller, less experienced manufacturers get the tools and the help to be in compliance.
Well, we've been seeing, like, as you know, because you work with them directly, is that, they're reaching out to us saying like, hey, we're putting this new camera out, or whatever the case may be, on the market. We'd like you guys to take a look at it. We've even had some manufacturers who had like zero, nothing in place in terms of security, reaching out and saying, like, hey, we want something. Can you help us build a plan? Can you help us? What's the right thing to do moving forward? Which another point that's very hopeful and things are going in the right direction.
So if there be a golden fish that grants you guys a wish when it comes to IoT, what would it be? I know what mine is, but I'm gonna
have a phone number on your website.
Yes.
That's it.
That's hard. The golden fish is difficult. My worst fear, though, I have a vulnerable device on my network and not aware of that.
Yeah, and I side.
I wish I could be better at filtering devices.
Right, and it's impossible. And you're a seasoned cybersecurity professional, so you can only imagine the average person out there has
a couple of rules for people who are concerned about their security. What would you recommend that they do in the absence maybe of a security solution, given their wide range of devices that they already have, somebody embedded beyond wall, drywall, in furniture, on the TV set?
I just want to say that, and that's a great question. I just want to say that there are internet service providers and tools such as the Netgear Armor products. And I'm isolating those because they're solitary. They're the only ones on the market effectively. So any other product that's similar to that is going to be great. So there's ways that you could choose that ISP that already provides this kind of technology on the network, and then even though you might choose a product that's seemingly unsecure, you're probably going to be better off and you're probably going to be unaffected. If not, I would recommend that there's plenty of resources online where you can check and rate different kind of devices off of their security. And even if you don't get that full information, in general, we found that some particular products that are made by respectable larger manufacturers are in general better designed with more security mindset. And in case there are vulnerabilities on those devices, they do get patched fast. These large manufacturers have the ability to afford a seasoned development team. They can afford quality and assurance teams. They can afford a bounty program, for example, where researchers from around the world can chip in and provide vulnerabilities if they show up, and so on and so forth. So when you get a stack of programs like this, it's more likely that getting that a little more expensive device might be a better option. And in fact, these devices are so cheap that, we're talking, the difference is not that high. You're going to get a $20 camera or a $49 camera. The difference might not be that significant. You might be better off just getting that. So, and if I got the golden fish, I was always definitely my greatest goal. If I could change the world, my greatest goal would be every manufacturer, please have a page where a researcher can contact you and inform you of, have that /security and put an email address, put a PGP key, a phone number, that somebody can reach you in 24 hours to let you know of that vulnerability so we can address it fast. That's my goal. So, anyway, we can go on forever. I know. I just want to thank you, Steve, for your support, your and your organization's support to make this this new frontier of security known.
I just speak about it. You guys are the geniuses.
Well, it takes three to dance, right?
That's true.
Education, research, and product development.
Exactly. So I hope we get to have another session and keep yapping about the subject matter, because it's something that's so real and it's so dynamic. As you know, I'm hoping that we revisit the Trustmark in action and in a few months from now when that's in place, so we see how that evolves and further down the road. And you know, until then, thank you, Steve, and thank you, Bob. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much.